Welcome into Pro Football Today. It's time for the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. Just basically piggybacking off what the in-game live crew was breaking down. We've got the Bengals who tried to go for two to take over this game at the end there, and it was a little too late. 34-35 would be where the Bengals fell behind the Ravens. But what an effort. Probably one of the best primetime games we've had the opportunity of covering and watching. Baltimore comes out on top. What did you think of this one, Tom? Because we talked at halftime. We weren't seeing too much out of the Ravens offense at that point. We knew they were going to make a push, but more importantly, the big plays that came out for the Bengals was just impressive. I mean, beyond impressive. Joe Burrow deserves a better defense around him to help solidify better victories down the stretch. But what did you make of this?
Yeah, this game flew over the total. You know, we were kind of worried about it at halftime about where was it going to land. You know, I did say I was the on under 53.5, and that's obviously a loss. But, you know, a lot of things, like you said, are true. Joe Burrow was awesome. 428 in the air with 4 touchdowns and no interceptions, and his defense is terrible. Now, granted, the Ravens' offense is awesome this year. Like, we knew that coming in. We discussed it. They're putting up points. They're putting up yards. No matter what you look at, they're one of the best teams this season on offense. And a lot of people are saying they're on pace to be one of the best offenses of all time. Lamar has an extremely quiet first half. He comes roaring to life in the second half. You know, Derrick Henry, all things considered, was kept pretty quiet. 16 of 68 on the ground. He did have the touchdown. And then, yeah, like you said, the big plays for the Ravens, Tyrone Walls going down the sidelines. And then we got to say, Jamar Chase, 264 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns is absolutely insane. So, I mean, credit to the Bengals because they tore apart this Ravens defense, which I think is the thing the Ravens need to figure out because their offense is amazing. But, man, what a game we had tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just to kind of put some of that in context, if you guys missed any parts of this game or more and certainly those chunk plays by Jamar Chase, it was 11 receptions that got him to 264. So just the magnitude of the big plays that he was able to connect with Joe Burrow on, I mean, that's just what continues to solidify the argument that Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You and I were talking about it during the break, but kind of pivoting over to the Ravens for a second, letting up 34 points, almost letting the Bengals back into this game. Their offense, yes, exciting to watch. Derrick Henry's role, he makes it count when it needs be, finding the end zone for this team. But, I mean, how far can this Ravens team really go if they're going to let in a Bengals team that doesn't have much of a defense 34 points in?
I mean, you know, just looking back briefly over some of their games, I mean, 29 points to the Browns they gave up, 31 to the Bucks, 23 to the Commanders. They gave up 38 to the Bengals in the game week 5, they went to overtime. 25 to the Cowboys. They lost the Raiders, 26 points, and 27 to the Chiefs. Like, you know, everyone historically is talking about the Ravens have had a great defense for 20 years or whatever it's been. Like, this is the thing that's going to hold them back. There are times where here's what it comes down to. If the Ravens offense is as inefficient as it was in the first half for a full game, they're going to lose games. That's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's just simply variance, right? Lamar was stifled in the first half. So was Derrick Henry. They didn't get things going. If a team can hold them to that level for an entire game, teams are going to put up 30 points and they're going to hold the Ravens to 10. So the defense is the main thing the Ravens have to figure out.
Absolutely, because a number of fans were kind of split decision when it came to whether or not to go for 2 and to try to take that win in overtime versus going for the 2, knowing that, you know, they were going to try to be stout defensively. There was a number of penalties that went crazy. There's some questionable calls to close out this game, but there's still so much more for Tom Vecchio and myself to get into when it comes to the Ravens versus the Bengals. In case you missed it, Ravens come out on top, narrow escape 35-34, and the narrow escape also being getting out of an overtime opportunity to lose. So don't go anywhere. Stick with Tom and myself here on SportsGrid TV for Pro Football Today, the post-game show.
Are they definitely done with Daniel Jones from this point? And any shot that Dable is off the sidelines, meaning he gets fired before next season?
They have a general manager in Joe Shane. Every big move has to get approval by ownership. So look, the bottom line is they don't know who their future quarterback is past this season. Tommy DeVito's clearly not the answer. They don't have it. Drew Lock's not the answer.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take, hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions once again. His third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
What can you say about Hunter? Besides the fact that he's got to be healthy. Remember, he had the shoulder injury that kind of limited him at, once he got into the end of the season. 17.9, 10.9 last year, and he should be, as usual, a double-double machine. He's got to be able to continue to show the ability to try and shoot the ball from 3.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid TV. And in case you missed it, Ravens get the narrow escape 35-34, and they do not have to go into overtime yet again in this matchup. But what a great primetime game we had the opportunity to watch. You got Lamar Jackson, who was only sitting at 65 passing yards heading into halftime, comes out on the other side with 290 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers. The biggest thing for me is the yardage for both of these quarterbacks and no interceptions. Then countering that, you got Burrow, 428 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. And again, I pair it the fact that there's 0 interceptions with all of the monster plays we saw down the field tonight. Also something to keep in mind, run game limited on both sides here, so that's also what kept this game very interesting. But Chase Brown, everybody who had him for like rush receive combined or really saw that shortage coming in, 52 receiving yards through 9 receptions, pretty nice play there. Tanner Hudson coming up with a bigger game, and I said it, if you wanted to just go Hudson for Hudson and just celebrate the fact that the Hudson last name is fantastic, then moving that line at halftime was probably a fun idea. I'm talking to some of the guys that wrote me on X, but more importantly, what does this game say about the Ravens and their compete down the stretch of the season? Because we were talking about it before we went to the break, 34 points that they let up. But you and I were also having an interesting conversation during the break about, like, where does this measure them? Where's the margin between them and, like, a Buffalo Bills team if they're going to let this many points on the board, yet they have a great offense?
So if their run defense is good. Right, their run defense is allowing fewer than 90 yards per game, and some of that is game script because their offense is so good. They get out these giant leads, and then opposing teams have to pass the ball, and they simply can't run it. So they're just, again, game script. They're just not giving up a lot of rushing yards. But then we actually have a pass defense for the Ravens that's actually terrible. So when teams play from behind, they actually can come back into the games easily because they're just bad. So when I'm looking at the Ravens, I'm like, Are going to opposing QB passing attempts the safest way to go just because they have to throw the ball, A, because they're playing from behind, and then B, it's actually easy for them to move the ball in the air. So I spoke about Joe Burrow over 36.5 attempts. He had 34 completions tonight. He had 56 attempts. So when we're looking at the Ravens, whoever they play in the coming weeks, I'm going to be looking at attempts very, very heavily and probably completions as well, because if they can just move the ball, we don't care about the running game. And yeah, Chase was held in check today on the ground, even with 13 attempts. We're going to see opposing quarterbacks rack up stats against the Ravens. So That's one thing I want to know. I wish we could do a video in video of when we were doing the pregame show when I spoke about the quarterbacks. And I think I specifically said there is a scenario where Joe Burrow goes over all of his props, which he did, his attempts, his completions, his yards, his touchdowns. The Ravens still win the game and the Bengals covered. All of those things happened tonight. The SGP I spoke about, that won. The SGP Adam spoke about, won. The point being, tune into the pregame show.
Which we got to get better with pulling those props back in, or those clips back in, because I mean it was very much on target. Now this does bring me to a bigger question that you and I usually discuss on the post game show. How do you start gauging targets and props moving forward from here? Because I know that the expectation of some of the receivers for the Ravens didn't live up to the hype. Adam, by the way, and the bone that he has to pick with Zay Flowers continue to go off, my guy, because 34 receiving yards, 4 receptions, no touchdowns. There was a number of people pulling their hair out for the lack of play versus Zay Flowers. Then you got Deontay Johnson, 1 reception for 6 yards. We thought that was going to change entirely coming out of halftime. So, like, how do we even start looking at this team? Is it continue to lock in on Mark Andrews? I mean, who had Wallace on the board to have 115 receiving yards through 3 receptions and 1 touchdown?
Right. So I would say the Tylan Wallace game tonight of 15 yards, obviously the long touchdown, 84 yards, I would say that's the outlier, right? Ultimately, that's the outlier. Like, he was a depth receiver before, and he still is. And I would expect Zay Flowers to have a big game. I would expect Deontay Johnson to continue to work his way into the offense alongside Bateman and then Nelson Aguilar. Like, Wallace has been here the whole season. This is the first time we're talking about him. So this is like the blip on the radar. That's an outlier. The other players, I would expect Zay Flowers to go for 60 or 70 yards and whoever their next game is. I would expect Deontay Johnson to continue to be involved. Maybe not against the Steelers next game. Point withstanding, I'm still going to look to the main players on the Ravens. If we're going to see their offense put up 30 points a game or whatever it is going to be, and Lamar is going to be able to pass for 250 yards, those are going to be the main players involved. I would say this is just like circumstantial that Walls got involved tonight. So he's not going to be a player I look to, like, long story short. I think on the other side, if T. Higgins continues to be out, it's obviously still the Jamar Chase show, but looking to Chase Brown coming out of the backfield with 9 catches, Mike Gesicki, and then looking to Yoshi Vosh or Hudson, those would be the secondary options well after Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I actually like that point out. Honestly, all jokes aside about the Hudson thing, I've seen the fact that his production can kind of ramp up in a sense of, 5 receptions when the trust starts getting built out there. So that can definitely be a look. Jamar Chase to the moon. I mean, you really can't go against that. So that was a fun one. Exactly. And I mean, he meant to the moon. I wherever you can go past the moon is where I feel like Chase ended up tonight. And then Gesicki kind of had him doing a little bit more, but 30 receiving yards, 4 receptions, that's probably right where some tight ends sit depending on the matchup. So definitely things that, to say the least, you don't have to go crazy engaging things because Wallace had the bigger game for the Ravens tonight. It's just one of those do or die, figure out how to wins.
Vinny, do we have the graphic for the tight ends? Did Gesicki hit the over on his yards? He hit the over on his receptions, which Adam spoke about, 4+ receptions, but I believe his yards were a little bit higher. Because he only so Gesicki, so Adam altered his receptions to 4+. So despite Gesicki's huge game last week against the Raiders, which I said we do have to take with a little bit of grain of salt, he hits the under on his yards, he hits the under on his receptions, but it's still 4+ for Adam's SGP, which is a very, very important thing to note.
That is something good to know. It pained me on the yardage side because I thought that he was going to be able to pick up a little bit more. Look, certain drops and certain pass interferences.
I mean, he had 9 targets.
Weather that out. Yeah, exactly.
He had 9 targets ultimately.
Exactly. The want was there, but the execution just, hey, there was a lot of flags, there was a lot of penalties, there was a number of things, but it still made for great primetime football. Don't go anywhere. Stick with Tom and myself here on Pro Football Today. It's the post-game show on SportsGrid TV. Make sure you're following at SportsGrid, nice and simple, at SportsGrid, as well as all of the great hosts here on SportsGrid TV. Stick with us because we got one more break coming up here. Join us on the other side.
Are they definitely done with Daniel Jones from this point? And any shot that Dable is off the sidelines, meaning he gets fired before next season?
They have a general manager in Joe Shane. Every big move has to get approval by ownership. So, look, the bottom line is they don't know who their future quarterback is past this season. Tommy DeVito's clearly not the answer. They don't have it. Drew Lock's not the answer.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Right here with you on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Odds in motion, trying to see what lines have moved throughout the week.
Never felt more comfortable in this set than I do for this year. I am ready. I'm just getting angry. The hot takes are going to be here all season long, people.
What in the world is going on in Miami, Dom?
It's not particularly anything to shy away from just because many people are on top of it.
Hot take.
I think this line is asking you once again to take New Orleans.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
A lot of concern, I would say, for Georgia in Carson Beck. 3 interceptions. Once again, his third 3-interception game in the last 5 for UGA.
You can argue if they had Alex Orji as their starting quarterback for Georgia, they would be perfect and unbeaten right now just by not turning the football over and running it with your talented backfield.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
What can you say about Hunter? Besides the fact that he's got to be healthy. Remember, he had the shoulder injury that kind of limited him at, once he got to the end of the season. 17.9, 10.9 last year, and he should be, as usual, a double-double machine. He's got to be able to continue to show the ability to try and shoot the ball from 3.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
One more rally with Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid TV. We'll get some final thoughts and start looking ahead to the Sunday slate. So anything else that you drew from this matchup between the Ravens and the Bengals tonight, Tom?
It's a big win if you have a Ravens division ticket. Obviously, they're jostling with the Steelers. I guess if you also have a Ravens ticket, you are rooting for the Commanders this weekend to beat the Steelers. So, go Commanders if you have that. If you have a Bengals ticket for them to make the playoffs or wherever it might be, it's getting pretty dark.
That's a great way to put that. I appreciate it. A lot of good game coming up this Sunday, but as we move over to the Sunday slate, with some news coming out that Christian McCaffrey should be returning to the roster, we started looking at some numbers, Tom. So how do we start picking apart this one? Niners taking on the Bucks, 6.5 on the spread, 50.5 on the total, which I'm not going to lie, total's kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I would say, the news is that today that, Schefter tweeted it that McCaffrey should be playing, and it is week 10. This is his first game. The question everyone wants to know, myself included, is he's going to play. What does that mean? And ultimately, how healthy is Christian McCaffrey, right? Mm-hmm. Or are we talking about, the beginning of last season where he comes in, he's ready to go, we're firing on all cylinders. He's going to play. Okay, is he going to see 25-plus total touches? Is he going to see 20-plus total touches? Is Shanahan going to come out and say, we're going to monitor his workload, or we're going to ease him back into he's going to have some quote that's going to tell us something, but at the same time, it tells us nothing, right? Oh, we're going to monitor his workload. Right, that doesn't mean anything. If they tell us we're gonna play him in stints, we're gonna play him in quick bursts, none of that means anything because ultimately it's Christian McCaffrey. He's going up against a pretty lackluster defense. I'm sorry to say for the Bucs, but I'm gonna be probably not on his props because there's a chance, and we said this about Puka Nacua in the Thursday night game that we did. And when Cooper Kupp came back, there's a chance that he goes for 100-plus yards tonight, on Sunday. But there's also a chance that he falls at 40 yards and he goes well under his props because they're easing him back into the offense. And actually, Jordan Mason has a solid game. So it is really, really tough until we start to build some consistency. And that's going to come from literally how many touches he has on the ball come to Sunday. So frankly, I'm going to be off of CMC and his props this week.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you because considering the state of the Bucs defense, if we're all being honest, like you don't need him to get down the field realistically, but you can use him to pick up points in the red zone, and that could be where the workload comes in. And considering the workload for CMC,
good point.
yeah, considering the workload for CMC, a moderate workload could be anything because this guy has legit been the man on this roster a number of games. So it's too touch and go for that one. I'm right there with you on that, Tom. Moving along to another game coming up, we got the Lions taking on the Texans. 3.5 on the spread, 48.5 on the total here. What's the big thing to gauge in this matchup?
I like points in this game. I do. Not something I often say, but I do like points in this game. And, I'm looking at some of the props now. I will say there's just props that at least I'm seeing on FanDuel right here. It's just for the Lions. There are some reports that Nico Collins could be making his return for the Texans. He's obviously been on IR for the last few weeks. We know that Stephon Diggs is done for the year. Tank Dell is playing a decent role in the midterm for that. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is sitting here at 65.5 yards. Right now for the Texans, they're sitting right around the bottom 10 in the league with 1,349 receiving yards allowed to opposing wide receivers. After the game that the Lions had last week, which was a solid game overall from a team perspective, we didn't see a whole lot from Jared Goff. I expect this game back inside on the turf, this to be an Amon-Ra St. Brown game. So give me the Sun God, not just going for 65 plus, but probably hitting that 70 or 80 mark. I like him always to find his way into the end zone as well. And then maybe looking to Najee Harris on the other side and maybe Austin Eckler combined rushing plus receiving if Brian Robinson does not play.
Big fan of that. Love the under as well because we've just seen the Steelers offense, no matter what, get off to slower starts. So all that energy really pumps out in the second half. But thank you guys so much for joining Tom and myself. This has been the Pro Football Today post-game show. You guys know where to catch us for the pregame party. That's usually Mondays and Thursdays. Follow SportsGrid over at SportsGrid as well as Tom, Dave Sherpen, Adam, Kevin, Joe, Donnie, everybody. But for the most part, that's going to be a wrap for us here for Thursday Night Football. In case you missed it, Ravens come out on top 35-34. Tom and I will catch you guys Sunday for the postgame show, and you'll catch Tom for all of the halftime action. Until then, guys, everybody have a safe and wonderful night.